Hello everyone, my name is Crazy Flying Chicken, and I'm here to talk to you about the most highly competitive game of Foxhole we've seen to date, which was the Russian Challenge, which took place almost 2 weeks ago. In it, the Russians took up the side of the colonials up against the North Americans and Europeans that took up the side of the Wardens. I'm going to call them the Westerners, and the game opened up a little bit like this. So you can see it's a very typical start with the Wardens or the Westerners taking Eldergate on the northwestern corner, and the Colonials or the Russians taking Foxcatcher on the southeast corner. Soon after that, the FOBs went up, and you can see right away where the conflict areas are going to be. With this crossroad and these two FOBs being super close together, you know there's going to be a lot of fighting there, and you can take a look at the footage in the bottom right-hand corner if you'd like to see that. And on the other side of the map, we've got the FOB here in Frostmarch with the Wardens anticipating a colonial advance into Crow's Nest. This was set up as a kind of buffer point, but the Colonials instead taking a more conservative approach and setting up their FOB here in Fool's Gate to protect their most critical crossroad from enemy partisans. Okay, so the battle lines got drawn something like this, which is really interesting to see because the Foxcatcher, because this road, even though this road wasn't entirely controlled by the Wardens, this was the main point of contention. There were a lot of players fighting alongside this road, which meant this road was unusable by the Colonials to supply Foxcatcher, which meant that the 3 or 4 players that were based here could only mine that one scrap node and use that refinery to basically spam foxholes in preparation for a holdout scenario against these Wardens. But before the situation of Foxcatcher got critical, small group of Russians moved around the bulk of the fighting, set up an artillery position here in the graveyard, and managed to snipe out this FOB from right under the Warden's noses, right near the start of the game, which was a really critical switch in the momentum, and definitely set the tone for the rest of the game. So with the Wardens on the back foot, what ended up happening was a lot of the remnants of what was left from that FOB set their spawn here at White Walk. Whoops, sorry about that. Set their spawn at White Walk. So the remnants set their spawn at White Walk and continued to push down this road, but the Warden High Command started pulling players from everywhere on the map. The people who were working here in Eldergate, the guys who were fortifying Frostmarch, and the people in Crow's Nest were all pulled back to the eastern side of the map in an effort to take Foxcatcher before it could be adequately supplied. They set up an artillery piece in the open and immediately sniped the town hall, and that really set the Warden players into a panic. A lot of them were going into Foxcatcher to try to defend it. Some of them were pushing north to try to push back the Warden advance, but on the whole, mostly they were ineffectual. The strong, sudden appearance of so many Warden players pushing into Foxcatcher caught the Russians off guard, and the town fell to the Westerners before any significant change or before any significant reaction could be mustered. So with the map looking like this now, the Wardens pushing south out of White Walk and now also out of Foxcatcher, the crossroad quickly fell to the Westerners or the Wardens. Now the Wardens did manage to rebuild an FOB over in EOP, which again further fortified their gains. But that essentially ended this conflict. As far as the purpose of this crossroad was concerned, the Russians no longer required it since they no longer had control of Foxcatcher. So instead, they took their players and they attacked Frostmarch while it was undefended. And they did manage to destroy the FOB, and they managed to replace it with one of their own. Okay, so here we are in the final stages of the game, where you can see the Wardens have pushed into Dullahan's Crest and managed to snipe that town hall, but they are mostly surrounded on all sides by these fobs and by the enemy defenses. And so a lot of the fighting happened here. Now, this is the main battle that I want to talk to you about because this is the battle that really decided the game. Now, we're on the start of day 2 of the Russian challenge, and the Russians had just gotten control of their tanks. Now, their whole force, everything, all of their players, all of their vehicles and equipment were now being funneled into retaking Dullahan's Crest because this soldier supply station was not enough to fuel everything. It was they needed more soldier supplies in order to keep their war effort going on all fronts, so they really needed Dullahan's Crest back. So they funneled their tanks and their half tracks and everything they could right into this push. And it was an amazing battle. And I highly recommend you check that one out. You can click for it in the bottom right-hand corner and just take a look at that. Okay, so at the end of that, the game basically ended with the wardens losing their FOB at the rear, but largely but most importantly, taking Dullahan's Crest and then pushing out into Fool's Gate and taking this crossroad from the Colonials. Now, this was essentially the end of the game for the Colonials or the Russians, because now that this front was being slowly pushed by players, they could no longer fuel this FOB with soldier supplies since they were now cut off from Spire, and their northern side was largely unprotected by their soft underbelly. So the wardens could now push up and down their main supply roads and clear out the last remnants of their resistance at will. Okay, so the next part of this video is just the combat footage. So thanks a lot for watching. Remember to please like and subscribe. If they are perfect in delivering their soldier supplies to exactly where they need to be, they're still going to be short. But they're going to want to send them, they're not going to be perfect in that, right? They're going to send 40 to one FOB, then 40 to the next. So they're going to need to balance out exactly where they're going to go. They may even want to stockpile a large number of them so that they could put together a concerted effort to retake Dullahan's Crest and get back their second soldier supply station. Wow, that was a mouthful.
Also, like, if one truck dies, that will literally put them back 8 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, which is enough time to completely roll over some defenses. A lack of men that have to run all the way back to Foxcatcher, although a short distance, maybe a 2-3 minute walk, maybe get a truck if you're lucky. It does just, everything just keeps setting them back. It will have a bit of a snowball effect. I have got in the game now. Well, flying around.
Oh my goodness, we have a Warden tank. Or sorry, a Colonial tank. Colonial tank just hit the field at Dullahan's Crest and knocked out a Warden half-track. We're seeing these Warden players running in panic. They've got a couple of RPGs though, so they can still handle it. But this will definitely help with their soldier supply problem.
So I'm actually over at the the main headquarters for the Colonials over in Foxcatcher, and they are pumping out tanks, proper Russian style.
Oh boy, this could be a turnaround point for those Russians. If they can use this slight tech advantage to get these tanks to retake Dullahan's Crest, that could spell some serious disaster for the Wardens. What an incredible game so far.
Right, can actually, over at EPO, we can see that this beautiful defense line that we saw at the end of the game last time being actually used. It's nothing too significant, like you said, light skirmishes, but definitely worthwhile investment that looks pretty and seems to be working all right.
A lot of RPGs being poured into that tank, but the driver is doing a good job of going forward, getting hit a little bit, taking a couple shots, then falling back. It's got the Russian defensive line here is perfectly built to support this tank. It can just roll forward and backwards. There's no hard choke points where it has to come back through. It's very porous, lets the tank move forward and back very easily.
What's the which tank are you looking at? What's the driver?
I can't see the driver.
Oh.
But it's the one at Dullahan's Crest, just out northeast of the road, right at the front line.
Oh, I see it. Max Rand was the driver, I think. I'm sure in a minute's time we'll be seeing more tanks roll up just to cause more havoc. The Wardens being 160 tech away from tanks. But they do have their artillery, which could easily disable tanks if you're lucky enough. It has been done. You can quite easily disable such slow vehicles.
So Castow confirmed it for me, and I trust his I trust his expert opinion. It was Leningrad. So they've repaired the tank fully, and the infantry are moving up with the line. So the Wardens saw that tank was going to be a major problem. They fell back immediately behind their wall, knowing that they had nothing left to really counter it, and they didn't want to just waste their lives for nothing. So they fell back to their defensive line. I still don't see any AT turrets, and the Russians are making good use of that and pushing up, building foxholes, setting up that defensive line so that the tank, when it rolls forward, will have a nice, safe place to fall back to. Seen a couple of Warden half-tracks appearing here to try to counter that tank. Not sure how effective that's going to be, but they're hiding very, very closely to that AT turret. Maybe their hope is to try and bait it over, take a couple shots, and get the tank to chase them.
There's one unknown or not very well-known tactic you can use. Not sure if it's an exploit or not, but we can actually shoot the gun of a friendly AT gun and it'll extend its range. So I'm not sure if that's still in the game, but it could be something to use to be sniped that tank.
How do you do this?
Because you know, if you shoot an AT gun as an enemy, it extends its range. You can do that with, you used to be able to do it where you can shoot a friendly AT gun and it'll extend its range. Might not be a thing anymore, but definitely a way to snipe tanks.
Excellent play by the Wardens here. They saw the tank falling back. Actually, I don't see the tank anywhere. The tank had backed out, and the moment it had, somebody must have had binoculars because they saw it, and the two half-tracks rushed in there to deal with all the colonial infantry laying around in the snow right in front of their defensive line. They wiped out a good 6 to 10 of them before they could fall back to their line. The Wardens have reoccupied that no man's land with those half-tracks. I still don't see that tank rolling up. It must have fallen back further to get repaired.
So the tank is now coming back up, receiving more shells from some logistics players. Likely going to destroy the half-tracks if they get too close.
Oh yeah, it seems to be stuck on the gate. It's got a small bug.
Stuck on a gate.
There you go, it's through. That's a bug that has been fixed for the next patch. We're just waiting for the next patch. So here's the half-tracks about to be met with fire and fury.
First shell in, already retreating back.
We're to see it.
Echo soldiers screaming tank between each other. We're sure we'll see some RPGs coming in.
Yep, lots of RPGs. Oh my goodness. Quadruple, 5, 6, 7.
Well.
Excellent shots.
Some more shells and it will be down.
What a reaction.
Such is the Russian way, more will be coming. I saw at least 4 or 5 being produced. But I'm sure with the lack of resources going for the Russians now, with only Fool's Gate and the Ivory Bank, Sulfur, and maybe Elder Gate. Actually, no, I take back what I said. The Russians have 4 Sulfur nodes. Compared to the Warden's 3 Sulfur nodes. Wow.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
I was actually expecting it to be the other way around, but
yeah, me too. I'm gonna draw that on the map because that's really critical information here. Whoops. So what Lightning was talking about, I can't get rid of those, but whatever. What Lightning's talking about is look at the line. Even though the Warden or the Colonials hold less ground than the Wardens, they actually control more of these sulfur nodes. There's one here, 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 and here. And that's 4 of them. This one might be contested, which leaves the Colonials with the Wardens with just 3 sulfur nodes. So even if the Wardens get their armor, they're not going to have as many shells as the Russians. And the shells are definitely the limiting factor with tanks.
So I have noticed from the Colonial HQ, some tanks are missing, so I'm sure they must be moving somewhere. I'm keeping an eye out on both fronts for them.
It'll be interesting to see a tank blitz for Foxcatcher.
Exactly, that's what I'm thinking. A little sneak attack into Foxcatcher with a tank, but I can already see BLD members building tank traps and AT guns everywhere. Clearly, the word has gotten around that the tanks are on the field.
Well, RPGs are still a pretty cost-effective way of dealing with tanks, as long as they can get them where they need to be.
Oh, definitely. One thing that I imagine will be the main way of keeping these tanks alive will be use of either multiple tanks or half tracks as support, because it might be a confliction of a half track shooting the RPG gunner. Are they going to shoot the half tracks or are they going to shoot the tank?
We're seeing some of these Warden players expending RPG rounds on pillboxes and defenses, so my guess is they don't feel like they're going to be running out. It's possible they've been anticipating this and been stockpiling sulfur for a while. Or it might be one fool, because he seems to have stopped. Maybe somebody yelled at him.
So over at the Colonial FOB, a little gang of half-tracks is pulling up. I can currently see 3 in the area. Might move to the front and help assist, but those RPGs will destroy them. 2 to the front and they're disabled, a 3rd one and they're down.
Well, they just learned their lesson about not dealing with infantry. With that tank rolling up unsupported, all those infantry with RPGs were enough to just tear it down. Maybe some half-tracks would make sense. Get rid of some, or whittle down the infantry just a bit before the tanks roll in.
Still no sign of the next tank rolling up.
I'd love to see like a blitzkrieg.
Use them. Yeah, blitzkrieg might actually be quite good to surprise and not lose the tank. Let's quickly get in, shock the enemy before they can actually get their AT guns, their RPGs.
Or go where they're not even here. If their plan wasn't to take Dullahan's Crest, like what if they blitzed into like White Walk or Foxcatcher with 3 tanks and some half-tracks?
I mean, if they're daring enough, I doubt there are any... Oh, a tank spotted at I-12. I'm going to quickly check it out now, see if this is true. So far, not hearing anything.
A lot of these Russian players are just... They're using their BMATs as their primary source of defense, so they're just spamming down these pillboxes and then repairing them as they can. Because they can't fight with their players. If they fight with their players, they're going to run out of soldier supplies. It's making it very difficult for them to fight on the front, though. We see a half-track roll in now.
I have found the tank on the front at Ipo, but it seems to be out of use. I imagine that they saw that the AT guns were in the area, RPGs were probably being used already just to destroy defenses, and it's just been left to stay inside the FOB.
Got a bit of a half-track duel going on.
So we have now got combined force of half-tracks and tanks marching over to the FOB at Fool's Gate. Exactly
These are
what
Russian?
I was predicting so far. Yeah, Russian, definitely.
So
Quite
it
a lot of
looks...
infantry stuck around here as well.
So it looks like they might be massing for an attack on Dullahan.
Oh, can you hear me?
Again, excellent driving by the Russian half-track player here. Driving forward just enough to get his shots off, and damaged. When his half-track gets damaged, he falls it back for repairs behind his defensive line. Both sides are not really dealing any significant damage to each other, but the Wardens have to go a lot further to get build materials to the front. So every point of damage that half-track does to the Wardens is probably worth twice as much as the Russians. Remember that this is a logistics game right now, and the Russians can't afford to use their soldier supplies, so straining the Warden logistics in any way they can is going to be a benefit. The Warden logistics, in order to get BMATs, build materials, to Dullahan's Crest, it's got to come either all the way from Foxcatcher, which is unlikely because the road is contested, or from Weathering Halls way here in the rear, where the Colonials only have to bring them from Northwatch, which is much shorter. So the Colonials can afford to just keep pushing their half-tracks up, taking some damage, putting out some shots, and then falling back, whereas the Wardens can't really continue to do this. They can, but then it'll cost them more defenses in the town.
I'm just going to quickly go AFK, I've got a random disconnect from the server, and it doesn't seem to have saved my spot. So I'm just going to quickly grab some food whilst I wait for this queue.
Good plan. It's a spray of machine gun fire here. 2 half-tracks and a pillbox are laying waste to those Warden half-tracks. There's a couple of RPGs in that infantry line, but the Warden half-tracks are sticking close enough to their defenses that they can't really be utilized. I did see a tank up north here as well, possibly trying to get on that flank to see if it could destroy any of those half-tracks. It's going to have to be careful, though, because there's that defensive turret just down the road. He probably hasn't seen it yet. Although he does have a tank commander there to let him know. This tank is moving in front of the line now to help support its half-tracks and push the Warden defenses back just a bit. Gets a nice shot off on that half-track. We're going to see a reaction of these infantry, see how many RPGs they bring up to the front. I haven't seen it. Oh, there's one RPG now coming up around the side of that pillbox. He does get a hit on that tank, so they're falling back now, realizing the danger. But he's going to put out 1 or 2 more shells onto the infantry. The half-tracks are doing a much better job now supporting that tank, so the tank is coming up, dealing damage to their line, falling back, and as the Warden infantry tries to land RPG shells on it, they're getting killed by these half-tracks. Much better combined arms forces here from the Russians, really showing what this game is meant to look like. Look at this perfect formation of 2 half-tracks and a tank pushing onto that line. There's not a lot they can do. This guy here in that Foxhole's got the right idea. Get in the Foxhole, fire off those shells, back up. Tank took some damage, so it's going to fall back now. The half-tracks are remaining there to hold the line and deal with some of those lighter defenses like those Foxholes. I am loving this coordination. These Russians have adapted their strategies so much in the last 24 hours. They've improved easily. I don't know. I can't apply the number to this, but they're improving dramatically from what we've seen in the first day. Oh, HE grenades landing on top of that armor. I'm not really sure where that came from. I must not have. Line of sight must have been blocked by the tank or something. I didn't see where those HEs were flying out of, but it didn't destroy the tank. It's just a little bit damaged and it's fallen back just a bit more. The hard defenses, the pillboxes are now gone, leaving only a light underbelly of Foxholes, which is why the half-tracks are now moving up. The Wardens aren't really sure how to react to this. They're falling back at rapid rates. There's a number of them just sitting there waiting, probably for more RPGs, but they really, really want to get their tanks to the field.
Right, I am back. I also seem to be back in the game.
Fantastic.
I'm prepared with a drink.
There are so many clippable moments of this Twitch stream, like...
What's happened?
We've got a colonial coordinated push going on Dullahan's now. They're just cutting through. They've got 2 half-tracks in support of a single tank, and they're just slicing through these Warden defenses.
Oh, I found them. Yep.
They're a little bit damaged right now. I'm not sure that they really spent the time to repair that tank, but it is... it's just doing amazing work. The Wardens have resorted to using HE grenades. I don't think they have any RPGs left. So I'm going to look at the map real quick in case any of you are joining us. The attack right now is coming from north, or from Fool's Gate here, pushing into Dullahan's Crest. The Warden's supply line from Weathering Halls is running this really long road all the way down to here at the King Marker.
I can see their barracks are in use for spawning by the Wardens, and garrisons are shooting up. I'm sure they're expecting to potentially lose the actual center of the town and have that be a battlefront.
Oh, and artillery support! There's an artillery piece from the, or a field artillery piece from the Russians that were sniping at the Warden half-tracks. Landed 2 good shells on top of that half-track, but it didn't kill it. My guess is it actually damaged the gun nest instead of the half-track, but they learned they saw that and immediately backed up. So now we've got 2 half-tracks, a tank, and a field artillery by these Russians being used in tandem together to push this line.
Amazing.
It's amazing. We have not seen coordination like this from anyone ever. This is the sort of stuff we dream about but haven't ever actually seen. Alright, I'm going to pop over to the Foxcatcher line since this one seems to have collided.
At F9, I have found a Warden artillery piece, just reached the FOB. So I imagine this is going to be their counter whilst their shells, their RPG shells and RPG tubes are out.
Do you mean a field artillery piece at the FOB?
Yeah, and there's an artillery piece.
Artillery, yeah. Yeah, I see it. I don't know. That seems like it might be a gamble because that's going to cost them a lot of sulfur, which we just identified is going to be one of their major choke points. Like, they better, like, my hope is that they're going to be aiming for those tanks and try to snipe them, but I don't know. It's going to be a risky play. We'll have to keep an eye on that.
This is the famous A Soldier, the howitzer gunner from yesterday. So I'm expecting some decent fire as long as his partner can keep up with him.
Yeah, well, if anybody can do it, is him.
Speaking of A Soldier, pushing propaganda to try and discourage the Russians into the old chat. The artillery piece taking point just north of the town hall. Not sure where the spotter is gone. I assume to potentially look for some tanks. Yep, the spotter is just ahead of him. Might see some Warden shells landing down in a minute.
Seeing the artillery piece from the Russian side now opening up as well.
Yep, just hit a garrison piece.
Yep,
Garrison is now destroyed, and I've just noticed on this main front line of the walls there is a colonial gate in between two garrisons. Could be used to just roll into the town. Oh no, the colonials are actually shelling their own gate.
Do not open that gate.
Do not open that gate, I hear that soldier say. That gate is not going to stop them. It is a paper wall at best.
Yep, the walls are going down just over where the old colonial FOB used to be. Still no action from the Warden artillery piece.
Oh, the wall goes down
is-
and they had
it
a
is
couple
aiming.
they had a couple of guys ready with RPGs on the other side of the wall and HE grenades. The second the wall went down, they fired it and blew or dropped it all on top of that tank. I'm not sure if it was disabled though. It looks like it's not moving.
Yeah, tank is disabled. 2 engineers repairing. The artillery piece is the perfect time for it to shell it now when it's stuck like this.
Yeah, come on, soldier, we need you. Couple of more HE grenades to keep it pinned in place. An artillery shot would be beautiful at this point. Come on.
The first shell just landed. Not sure if that's colonial or Warden.
Looked like a miss in either case.
Seems to be colonial.
Oh, they got it moving
the tank
again.
is back up.
Those Russians, man, they're building up. They got those build maps just flowing to that front line.
Oh, the Warden artillery just fired. I heard it. Not sure where that landed.
Is it possible they're aiming for defenses? Or possibly trying to counter battery the artillery piece? Oh, the Russian artillery is still aiming for that half track. Looks like a miss, but it was very close.
Oh, artillery piece down, countered by the Warden one. Colonial piece is now down. Both the crew splattered on the floor. The tank saw the artillery and is now returning back to the front for a more safer haven.
So A-Soldier, rather than sniping down that tank, took that opportunity to find and zero in on the enemy artillery and sniped it down with perfect accuracy. Just brilliant.
A good choice in my opinion, yeah. The tank stopped and is now repairing. The driver is not inside. This could be a great time. Oh, the driver's gone back in. Seems to be pulling off. Still potential for the artillery piece to lock in, but might be a bit too far to get the coordination quite right.
It looks like the Russians have backed off just a bit. Maybe they've taken a little too much damage and they're just trying to get everything back up to full. They lost one half track at the front here that looked like it was operating on its own. But it did cost them a lot of
Just gone
RPGs.
down. Oh, the artillery piece is still firing. I just heard it land
Yeah, it hit the tank.
on top of the tank, yeah.
So this is going to force those tanks to fall further back in order to repair. Even though it's probably not going to kill them, it means the tanks don't feel safe near the front. They have to go way back and get repaired every time they get hit with those RPGs, which is going to slow down their advance quite a bit.
Checking over at the EPO front, little manpower from both sides over here. The tank from the Colonials is still locked up in the FOB due to the amount of RPGs and gun turrets that are in the area. Seems that the front has not moved since we last checked on it.
So the Russians do have a tank over here at EPO?
Yeah, but it's out of use.
Yeah, I just took a pass through there. It does look like a skeleton crew. Just manning those defenses.
Momentary silence between the fronts. No one's going forward. Artillery piece is still firing from the Wardens. I can hear the shells crashing down, not sure where yet. Seems to be targeted for a gate, or actually potentially for a half track.
I'm seeing a lot of wardens with RPGs just sitting behind that gate, though. They must have gotten a new shipment. They're just waiting for those tanks to come back up. It's going to be, this means the Russians are going to have to use infantry to push up and help thin those RPGs out before the tanks and the half-tracks can roll in. A howitzer would really benefit the Russians right now.
Definitely. Is it a worthy investment of sulfur?
A good question. Especially with a soldier on that artillery piece for the wardens that would probably snipe it if they tried to build it.
Yeah, an easy snipe, yeah.
Got a half-track here probing the line. You can see these RPG guys just itching to get ready. That takes it takes an RPG shell and a couple of HEs. It damages it and knocks it out. It's now disabled. And down. Half-track down for the Russians. It appears that the wardens have received the necessary equipment to staunch this armored assault.
So we've now actually seen the second tank come up to the the Fool's Gate front, both back behind the lines, one repairing. I assume this is the one from before. So this dual tank gameplay could be good for the Russians if they can get some more half-track and infantry to support them.
Great gas grenade! Great gas grenade gets tossed over the wall at those waiting infantry with those RPGs that were standing there trying to save this poor wounded soldier. Gets a good 3 of them, but the gas is going to give them something to think about because this is right now their primary defense against the armor are infantry with RPGs. They're going to want some gas masks to keep them safe now.
Hey, how are you today? No one is gone, they all died.
A lack of shells, the tank is returning to the FOB.
Hey, any Russian on the other side that can hear me?
Yes, yes. What?
How's it going?
It's okay. How are you?
The wardens, the Russians are fraternizing on the opposite sides of this
I
gate.
cannot hear you. Your friends are screaming some...
Classified, shut up.
The wardens actually know 40 tech away from unlocking the tanks of their own.
It's a little bit further than I would have expected.
Well, where are you from, my Russian dude? Where are you from? Russia?
I'm from Ukraine.
Oh, you're from Ukraine? That's like the, you know...
You're
that's
a spy.
How's it going, my Russian companion?
Of course it's Casper fraternizing. Figures. I see the artillery piece from a soldier moving up further into position.
Too close, and he might actually have to move back if the tanks move up too close to them.
That's a very good point. If they blitz in, they might get under the gun.
The Russian artillery returning to the front, it seems, with a new one with the same crew. And the tank is returning to the battlefield from the FOB. Got over the gate this time, first try.
That should be an achievement unlock.
I'll name it after you. What's your name?
So yeah, it seems shells have been loaded up in both the artillery piece and the tank. The second tank still left vacant at the front. I'm not sure if we can see any Russian half-tracks around.
But a fully repaired Devitt Mark III tank moving up into position right back on the front line to renew this assault. In place of those half-tracks, it looks like a lot of the infantry are using HMGs now. Probably the right move given all those RPGs out there.
Oh, exactly what I predicted. A soldier moving back the artillery piece due to a range issue.
I'm just going to check that range on that artillery piece. Yeah, so the 75 meter minimum range is right at the front line right now, so he's in a really good spot to offer close fire support to the Warden front line.
The spotter is now dialing in. I'm sure this tank will see some shells flying at him soon, and we might actually see another counter artillery from the Wardens to the Russians, or from the Russians to the Wardens.
The Russians are getting out to repair that tank. I have a feeling we're going to see a shell land right on top of them. Assuming that a soldier can get eyes on it, because it's quite a distance for him.
Oh,
Direct hit.
Shells, yep. Direct hit to the side of the armor, weaker than the front. A second shell might have done a little bit of damage there, but might also not have been enough.
He's bugging out quickly. He sees his mistake and is falling further back to the rear line. Excellent fire support from a soldier.
So it seems that the Russian artillery piece is getting manned once again, now at the front by both the tanks. Will it be able to counter the Warden artillery? We're not too sure, because having to move up and then spot is a bit harder than already being in position.
The infantry is starting to take a more frontline approach on this game, though, because with all those RPGs being played and are being brought to the front line, the infantry now are the ones that have to make the pushes. The vehicles are only in support. So we're seeing a lot of the infantry right up against the edge of the gate here, reluctant to move in, but they have gas grenades. The gas is going to make some good effect here, assuming they don't get a shipment of gas masks. Seeing some AT turrets going up now by those wardens. But the Russians are now within a stone's throw of that town hall. Should be noted that the town hall itself is an irrelevant piece now because the town is contested.
This tank once again moving back up after repairs. Artillery pieces, the Russians not doing much of anything yet.
It's possible they're waiting for the tank to bait out the shot from the artillery piece so the artillery can counter battery.
The spotter is dialing in the azimuth for the artillery piece on the Warden side. Shot might be fired in a moment's time.
AT turret puts 2 shells into that tank and an RPG shell. There's a lot of damage going on top of that tank.
Too close, the Warden artillery piece has to move back again.
Oh, they damaged the tank. The tank is now damaged at the front line, which means that artillery piece could finish it off if it notices. Those wardens sacrificed a lot to get that thing damaged, so hopefully a soldier sees it. Nope, they got it repaired really fast, and that tank is on the move again. That was really close, and it cost the wardens a lot of their RPGs in order to do it.
Tank is falling back. Field artillery is aiming at us.
I just heard a shell land in the town. Not sure on what. Another shell hit again. Trying to find where it is.
Lightning.
Hello.
Did you see my conversation with the Russian and all of our RPGs?
Yeah, I think Crazy caught some of it.
It was a nice. We had like 10 RPGs just sitting by the wall waiting for the tank to come through.
Oh, I got that on camera, Casper. That was beautiful.
Yeah. Did you see? Did you hear my commentary with the Russian between
Yeah,
the walls?
you're fraternizing with the enemy?
Not fraternizing. I was trying to get him to bring me a tank. It almost worked. Technically, it worked. He brought the tank.
Technically, it worked. They did bring you the tank.
See, I'm trying to get myself a tank, and you know.
So everybody.
It's working.
So for the stream's sake, this is Casper. He's the leader of Edge, one of the smaller clans that are participating in this game. What do you think of the Russian attack right now?
Which one?
The one on Dullahan's crest.
It exists.
It
It's not
exists. You're
really
not worried?
Not really. I mean, they got tanks, but it's... I mean, they have to push in. Like, they can keep blowing up, like, the town hall every time we rebuild it. But, like, we can just keep running in. It's not a big deal. Like, we have RPGs out the ass. We're gonna be here a while.
So you think your supplies are going to outlast them?
Oh, yeah. Like, that's not really an issue. Like, if I had set my spawn, I would already be back talking to my Russian companion over there, Samuel, from the clan DS, or 101st. 101st? Is it Thirth?
It's
It's
1th.
Diff?
Yeah, 101
Yeah.
th.
Yeah, so...
To be fair, I think
I'll
that's
try,
actually
man.
how they do it, or they did it in the Soviet army. I could be wrong.
I don't know. I don't know Russian, so you know. But yeah, no, I'll be back talking to my Russian companion in a second. We were having a
Alrighty.
good old chat. They tried to gas us too, which wasn't nice, but you know, we told them off, and then they stopped, so it was nice. But yep, I'll be back.
Good luck. We're seeing a lot of AT turrets being spammed down here.
So we've actually seen the second tank move up to the front, and we actually have the half tracks are returning, so we can see a full arsenal of artillery, half tracks, and tanks in the area. But we've just had a call from A2DK Logistics that 4 more tech is needed to unlock tanks on the Warden side.
Four
and
more?
the artillery piece of the Colonials has just been taken out by a soldier and his crew. And yeah, that was 4 more tech needed for tanks.
Man, 8 Soldier is MVPing this front line defense for the Wardens right now. Seeing a renewed Russian advance, mostly infantry in this half track, but they don't want to get too close because they know those AT turrets are spammed on the other side of that wall. I like this AT turret placement right here behind the wall because the Russians may not necessarily see it. It may be hidden by that wall, and the second that wall goes down, it's going to start opening up on whatever vehicles are in range. So it's a nice little ambush they've set up there. We'll see how effective it is.
So a soldier and his crew on the artillery have now moved over towards the south side of their town hall. Still we actually just saw Wardens take out their own wall after building an AT gun behind it in an attempt to destroy a half-track.
AT grenades from the Russian players onto that AT turret. They want to clear these AT turrets because that's really what's stopping their advance right now.
2 direct hits on one of the tanks from the artillery piece.
Jeez, 8 Soldiers
Both of them
just
have
doing
shells
work.
that are running.
Taking a look at 8 Soldiers' artillery piece right here. Now, bearing in mind, he is being extremely effective with these shells. It was a risky move, but it definitely seems to be paying off. However, those shells are extremely expensive for the Wardens, so even if the Wardens get their tanks, they may not have a huge stockpile of sulfur to build shells for them. This artillery piece is firing on a tank. It manages to get one of the rear tanks down. Looked like that one was stopped without shells in it, though. Here comes a Warden players running up with HE grenades, trying to land them on those players building that pillbox. He gets it. Throws one more HE grenade before getting taken out. The frontline AT turret is down, and the front line has pushed yet again further towards the Warden side. The Wardens are losing ground inch by inch. Pretty soon this will become a city fight, which will make the vehicles less valuable, making it more of an infantry game. If the Wardens can succeed in keeping the Russians outside of the town, then the tanks that they're hoping to get will be of far more use. But if the Russians manage to break into the town soon, then the tanks and the half-tracks are going to find themselves without a place in the battlefield.
So meanwhile, over on the EPO front, the Wardens, although they haven't moved much, they have moved the front down slightly, breaking through one of the several lines of defences that the Russians have made.
Is this over at EPO?
Yeah, it seems like HMGs are the weapon of choice currently for the Wardens, just surely destroying weapons with bullets. Destroying defences with bullets.
Oh yeah, they're definitely cutting through. They've still got a ways to go to get to that fob, but they're getting there.
I can definitely see more Russian infantry has reached this front.
One of the major objectives on this side of the map, though, is for the Wardens to get control of that sulfur node. Even if they can't get control of it, it would be really good if they could prevent the Russian access to it, since that's what's fueling their war machine over in Doulahan.
So we've just heard a cry once again from the 82DK logistics that now tanks have been unlocked, so we'll be seeing the Warden's Devitt hit the field. Artillery hitting the tanks again. A soldier doing phenomenal work with his crew to take out those tanks. We can see that there is a howitzer being made by the Wardens right next to their artillery piece in an attempt either to destroy defences, infantry or the vehicles. Could be a good use of sulfur if they can use it properly.
That almost worked. Someone go. Oh, I hit. Oh. What this? That's a gap. Oh, no, you fucking. Gas, 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 gas.
I see a howitzer piece in place by the Wardens now. So recognizing their need for sulfur, I guess they're switching out into a less sulfur-intensive required artillery. I don't know how effective the howitzer is at taking tanks out, though. But regardless, these defenses and all that infantry are really going to be make prime targets for that howitzer. But the Wardens are probably under that gun. They're right now close enough to the defenses that I don't think that howitzer can fire at them. However, whenever they do fall back to repair, they will get hit.
A flank attack with HE on a Russian half-track, setting the gunner flying in the air. A good play from some 82DK members, deterring both the tank and the half-track.
And I'm seeing some sandbags going up behind these gun nests. I bet these Wardens have their fingers crossed that this is where the line gets drawn.
The first howitzer shell has been fired.
Looks like he's aiming for that tank, the damaged tank in the road.
Ooh, another shell hits.
Doesn't appear to be doing too much damage, though. And that it's falling back a little bit further. Now the vulnerability of this howitzer is that it's no longer moving, so that the Russians, if they wanted to knock it out, would only have to move up their field artillery and snipe it.
It's not my.
So the Warden defensive line here is
Samuel!
really well mixed. I'm looking at this for possible vulnerabilities, and I don't see many. Right now, what they really want to do is deal with either the AT turrets so that their tanks can move up,
Hey, Blue.
or they want to deal with the howitzers so that they can shell the
I appreciate you.
defenses. But right now, the Wardens do have a solid front line here. There's not a lot that the Russians can do without dealing with at least one of these factors. They have to get rid of that howitzer, or they've got to get rid of those AT turrets. I suppose they could also try to get rid of the gun nests, but they might be a little bit more difficult to remove.
The only real way I can see the Russians having a devastating blow on the Wardens would be by destroying their FOB with a howitzer. Although this won't have an effect on the defences, because a second FOB is up at G8, which is also connected by tunnel networks. This could have a pretty good effect on the supplies of the Wardens.
And it is interesting what you were mentioning earlier about the barracks. They have a couple of barracks in town as spawn points, or as forward spawn points. I wonder if those are being used for like their weapons teams, like a soldier and his artillery crew, so they can jump back on the guns if they get killed. The tank and half-track are moving up, doing some risky plays to try to land some shots on those AT turrets. Oh, every time you see those AT turrets wiggle, it sends my heart racing.
So
This
it seems
really-
that the Russian defences have now reached a much more forward position than they were before, and the Warden defences have pushed back from that initial wall, the final wall on the southern front, going down. A desperate spam of defences is gone down by egoists. It also seems like this howitzer has become irrelevant now that the front has moved up so much, because the vehicles can no longer be focused.
It's still useful for making sure those vehicles can't repair too close to the front, though. They can't just fall back into their line and repair. They have to go all the way back to Fool's Gate.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
All the walls now are completely gone from the Wardens, which exposes their entire gun nest AT wall, or AT turret wall. But this really looks like the last formidable defense of the Wardens before the town starts to really open up. There's very few defenses past the town hall. There's still a few, but it doesn't look like there's any concerted line. This is it. This is basically the last line of defense for the town before the Russian infantry breach it, and it becomes a street fight. It's probably worth noting that in a street fight, the advantage still goes to the Wardens because of that their increased soldier supply count. In street fights, the vehicles will see much less use. They'll be taking way too much damage from enemy infantry hiding in the buildings. So the infantry will have to be the ones to push the line through the town, but with a limited soldier supply count, it may be difficult for the Russians to keep up a sustained attack. That being said, we haven't seen a concerted infantry push here at Dullahan's Crest for quite some time, so maybe they've got a stockpile and they're ready for this. One more Foxhole goes down. Now begins the true task of dealing with this AT gun nest line.
So currently on the EPO front, it seems that Pug is pushed up quite far from where they started off a couple hours ago. Although they haven't reached much further of the line that we were talking about maybe 15 minutes ago, they have actually managed to get their infantry up to their sandbag lines.
I'm going to take a look at the EPO fight. Good to get some variation here.
It's become less building and more actual fighting now from the players.
Oh yeah, I'm seeing a lot of the buildings, or a lot of the foxholes from the Warden side have already pushed all the way up. So they have at least a decent number of BMATs being funneled towards them. The Colonials don't look like they're being given a lot of supplies here. It looks like these soldiers are just meant, they were instructed to hold the line and were not given any equipment to do it. It looks like they're just using rifles, no grenades, no nothing. But meanwhile the Wardens are just pushing, they're pushing hard into that line.
There seems to be a focus on AT guns from the Wardens, so maybe we can expect them to be using their tanks here. From what I can tell, there's only one major AT gun in place now from the Colonial side. So destroying that one AT gun on the road could allow them to bring up their own tank and destroy these gun nests with ease.
Very true. That's the only gun nest, even as far as the sulfur node. Or the only, oh no, there's one more AT turret before they hit the fob.
I'm sure we'll see some more spam of it as the Russians realise their lack of defences, or specific defences.
Or the moment they see a tank hit the field. That'll be exciting. It'll be a terrifying moment for the Russians. Oh, the G8 fob just went down. This is the rear fob for the Wardens. This is the one they were using as a fallback position in case their forward position was destroyed. It was looked like it was sniped by howitzer fire, possibly from the north.
Oh, most certainly from the north, because that's the Frost March FOB is a very good location to be used just to come up behind them, get quite easily in range of the enemy. I'm going to see if I can find any evidence of the people who've done this.
I don't see any, but it might have been that same group that that destroyed their own howitzer when they left.
Yeah, if we can't see any howitzers here, it's likely that RST clan. Let me see if they actually still are here. Oh no, STR, and yeah, there's actually more of them than there were yesterday.
They're multiplying. So it's scary that this fob, the one that the Wardens are using to hold Dullahan's crest, is not that well protected. If the Colonials were able to snipe the rear one, they're also able to snipe the forward one, and that's probably going to send a ripple of fear through the Warden lines right now. The Wardens have, however, managed to push back out of their town.
I'm actually now suspecting that the Colonials were from the south, because the lack of radio towers down there, or lack of coverage, means that they could easily sneak up, and hence why we didn't notice it on our radars.
Disabled. Last fucking disabled. Take it down.
A lot of infantry just getting railed on by these by this half track. But it goes down to RPG fire. It seems to have been a stall in the Colonial attack. Maybe they've run out of soldier supplies. Maybe their tanks have fallen back to repair. Or maybe they fell back to deal with those rear fobs rather than pushing in through the front. In response to this, very interestingly, the Wardens are rebuilding the town hall in Dullahan's Crest. I guess they have the same thought, that if they lose that fob, they may lose the town, so they figure, let's build this town hall up, maybe we can use this instead and while if the fob goes down. It won't be a secure place to spawn though, because this, just south of that town hall is a long dividing wall that the Colonials have control of the other side of, so they'll be able to just snipe that town hall whenever they choose.
A plead for logistics at the Pug FOB at EPO at JI-10 might actually be a bad call right now for logistics, because currently Pug seem to be in need of logistics, but if this new town hall's going up, they're definitely going to need some new logistics. seems to be specifically a cry for air supplies, which definitely won't be coming to them if HDK can handle it.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of requirement for F supplies on all fronts from the Wardens right now. But the Colonials too.